tuning in to another episode of the Berardo Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Berardo. Each episode I focus on giving you fun, entertaining content on health, happiness, positivity, and anything else that's important to us humans. If you haven't already, you can follow me on Instagram at the Berardo, and don't forget to subscribe to the show by visiting theberardo.com/thepodcast, or just click that little subscribe button wherever you're listening to the podcast. Thanks again, and enjoy the episode.
You're just funny. It's funny, the way you tell the story and everything.
Funny how?
Come here though. Yeah, he's crazy, see? Who are you?
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Are you ready?
All right. What's up, friends? So I normally don't post this, but I enjoyed this conversation. I was actually a guest on someone else's podcast, which I've been on a couple, and I don't typically post, but this was a really fun conversation. I'm really passionate about it. I was actually a guest on the Climate Correction podcast, which if you've been following me for a while, you know that's the VoLo Foundation. They just started their own podcast, and the VoLo Foundation, I've had them on the show before. Thais and David Vogel are, they started this foundation, and they're just doing some incredible things to educate mainly Florida, but also the whole country on the impact that climate change has done to, the earth. But more importantly, they use science-driven data to educate us. Visit the VoLoFoundation.org and you can learn all about their organization. They're doing some great things, but I was actually a guest on the Climate Correction podcast, so I wanted to share this audio with you, and it's currently available on the Climate Correction podcast. They're available everywhere, Spotify, Apple. I encourage you to check them out. There's some great speakers and some really fun educational content. This was my chat with Shannon Magazine, and sorry, Shannon, if I completely butchered your last name. That's a tough one. But before we get into today's episode, I do want to thank our friends over at Golden Ratio. So if you guys don't know, if you don't follow me on Instagram, you need to check it out, because I'm not sure about you, but there's nothing worse than like waking up in the morning and having a cup of coffee and trying to, kiss your spouse and you have that coffee breath. Yeah, not okay. Well, the cool thing with Golden Ratio, it's actually coffee, but it has none of the bad side effects. So no coffee breath, no stained teeth, and it's actually 5 times less acidic than your normal coffee. Now, how they're able to do this is they actually slow roast all their beans, so it's more smooth and flavorful than most coffee, and it drinks more like a tea. It even comes in a little tea bag, so you can boil some hot water, pour that over the tea bag, let it steep for about 10 minutes just like you would a tea, and boom, you got some smooth, delicious coffee right at your fingertips. Great for an afternoon pick-me-up. Have it in the morning, whatever you want. It's got the exact same amount of caffeine as a regular cup of coffee. So you're getting all the benefits of coffee, but none of the bad side effects. Visit drinkgoldenratio.com, use the code THEBERARDO, and you're going to get 20% off your entire order. I recommend trying their variety pack because then you could try out all the different flavors. The vanilla coconut's probably one of my favorites, but they're all good. Visit drinkgoldenratio.com, use the code THEBERARDO, and you're going to get 20% off. I also do want to thank our friends over at Rainforest Bowls. So, of course, this podcast is mainly about climate change, being happy, being healthy, being sustainable. Rainforest Bowls has actually really helped me in that process because instead of using regular silverware and utensils that I usually do, I've been using a lot more rainforest bowls. Now, these rainforest bowls are exactly what they sound. They're from the rainforest, but what's great about rainforest bowls is they're actually using the coconut shells and the wood cutoffs to create their own utensils and silverware, and even all their bowls and plates. They're using all the wood cutoffs, coconut shells that normally would just get burned up and discarded. But Rainforest Bowls actually creates these great bowls, utensils, straws, all types of cool stuff from these wood cutoffs. That way they're not wasting anything. It's a really great company. Every purchase that you make goes to a good cause. Each purchase you make will help plant a tree in the rainforest. So far, year to date, they've planted over 10,000 trees in the rainforest. So thank you, Rainforest Bowls. If you want to check out all their utensils, their bowls, their silverware, they even have like wine glasses and coffee mugs now. It's a really, really cool company. Visit rainforestbowls.com and you can actually use the code THEBERARDO and you're going to get a huge discount at checkout. Again, rainforestbowls.com. Use the code THEBERARDO at checkout. Okay, with all that said, I do want to get into today's episode. Again, this is from the Climate Correction Podcast. Hop over to Shannon and I's conversation. This was a great chat.
Today, joining us is Tony Berardo. He is a lifestyle personality and an absolute amazing person. He is the brains and the heart and the brawn behind theberardo.com. It is a brand that exists online in a podcast, in a vodcast. You can get motivational swag, all of it on his website. He uses his platform and his brand to spread health and happiness in the easiest way possible. And he creates content that's accessible and interesting to everybody. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Shannon, it is a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
So I know that the reason that you're here is because you have a very large interest and you're passionate about a sustainable future for the planet. And recently you've taken on a plant-based diet. So what I'd like to know first is just tell us about you. Tell us your story. Kind of let us know what's happened in your life that's driven you to have this interest in a sustainable planet.
Yeah. Well, first off, let me say I've listened to the other episodes. I'm loving them. So you guys are doing a great job. Keep up the good work. So I'm definitely happy to be on the
Thank you.
show. And yeah, in terms of me personally, I never thought living a sustainable or plant-based lifestyle, or even honestly every single day, and I'm sure like a lot of people listening, every single day I wasn't thinking about the earth, which is kind of weird when you say it out loud. Like even me just saying it, I kind of laugh a little bit because we should worry about it, but I think because we have so much going on in our lives that every single day we're just not consuming content to learn about the earth and our impact as a species. And it wasn't really until, well, two things. First, the podcast I started it about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I started having guests on that were educating me, like Thais and a lot of other people that are passionate about eating healthy, the earth, climate change. And I started educating myself about 2, 3 years ago on this.
And that's the
But the big
Berardo podcast for anyone listening that wants to
That's
double
right.
dip. Hmm.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the Berardo podcast, theberardo.com for all that stuff. But I've always, been kind of healthy. Even me and Thais, we used to work at a health club together. So I was a trainer for many, many years. But again, I didn't really think about my impact of what I was eating. And it wasn't until about 6 years ago that I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And for people that don't know, Crohn's is an intestinal disease that more often than not is caused by bad eating habits. Previously, that it's been linked to smoking, which I did smoke about 15 years ago. And there's really no cure for it. It's not hereditary. There's no reason behind it. No one really knows what to do with it except maybe put people on medication. So about 6 years ago, I went on medication, and I was still having some pretty bad episodes where I would have to end up going to the hospital, and I would be there for sometimes weeks at a time. And the medication wasn't working. And then eventually I thought to myself, well, I was pretty big. I was about 165 pounds, and I'm only 5'4", 5'5", 5'6" on a good day. And, I ended up thinking to myself, I should probably change up my eating habits. Let me see what happens, because I can't keep living like this. And I started eliminating red meat from my diet, and I was still having some episodes. And then I eliminated fish only and red meat. So then I was kind of more vegetarian. So I was still eating dairy and cheese and milk and things like that. And I was still having these episodes. Well, it was about 2.5 years ago, again, when I started my podcast, to where I went full vegan, through all the books I've read and the studies and everything like that. And being, fully plant-based really helped my symptoms. And I'm happy to say I've been off my medication for about a year and a half now. I still have occasional, issues here and there, but nothing as extravagant as it was 5 years ago. And I don't think going plant-based is the cure for Crohn's disease, but for me, it worked. It's different for every single person. So then I kind of transitioned my podcast to my blog, where I post recipes on how to, live healthy and eat healthy. And that's kind of how I started the journey about 2 years ago. And I couldn't be happier. After interviewing a lot of people that either have similar symptoms or maybe that follow a plant-based diet, I've started to really understand and immerse myself in that plant-based vegan culture. And it's not surprising that, if you know anybody who's vegan or is plant-based, typically they care more about the planet than someone who just eats at McDonald's every single day, right? Like, not to stereotype, but more often than not, those people
100%.
just, yeah, typically when they eat plant-based or vegan, a lot of people are doing it because they believe that every single animal and human are the same in terms of, we should all be on this planet and live together, and we shouldn't have to harm animals just to feed ourselves when we can eat plants and live off that. So once I immersed myself in that culture, I really got super interested in the climate part of it, and that's
How did you
when
make that connection? It's so interesting.
yeah. Well, there was a lot of steps. The most easiest way to explain it would probably be that once I realized that I can go fully plant based, then I started thinking to myself, well, because I'm fully plant based, why was I eating meat? And is there any benefit to eating meat versus not eating meat? And then I started digging a little bit more. And then once I started realizing that factory farming and everything that goes in, not just with, green gas emissions and, what we do to the animals, but, forget the planet aside, but just really understanding how we actually farm animals was despicable. And I started connecting the dots to that, to where we have to mass produce all these foods that we don't necessarily have to eat. Like, we want to eat it, that's there's a difference there, but we don't have to eat it. And that's what I understood by doing my research on a plant-based diet versus actually eating meat. And then I was like, well, if we don't have to kill animals and we don't have to eat meat, then why are we factory farming? Well, it's because we have to keep up with demand. And because we have to keep up with demand and everyone wants to eat meat, all these companies, they're just trying to make some money. So because they're doing this, they're not seeing the massive scale of harm that we're doing to the earth. And the more we crave meat and the more we crave things that are doing harm to the environment, producing these greenhouse emissions, and that's going to affect the earth. Maybe not for you and me today, Shannon, but maybe my kids, maybe my kids, maybe it's 1,000 years from now. But I always like to think to myself that everything has a shelf life. You can't open up a chicken and cook a chicken, and you can't keep it outside at room temperature for 15 days, right? Everything eventually goes bad. So the earth is no different. There is a timestamp where earth is going to go bad. And I think if we could do our part individually and, increase the shelf life of earth, I think that's the important thing. And I've learned a lot more over the years being plant-based and kind of understanding both sides of that. And that's what really kind of led me where I'm at today.
So that's very intelligent, because it sounds like obviously there were some pretty harsh biological issues going on that were forcing a change in your life. And you chose to do research that drove you to a place where now you maintain a pretty strict, or, comfortably strict plant-based diet. And it's interesting to me that it didn't take so long for your body to adjust to the point where you didn't need medication anymore. So your body adjusted pretty quickly. And as we've seen in times when greenhouse gas emissions are stopped for a period of time due to COVID, as an example, the earth
Yeah.
also tends to bounce back pretty quickly. So there is a bit of a correlation there between how our bodies respond to these types of choices, low emitting choices, and how the earth also responds.
No, absolutely. No, I couldn't have said it better. And no matter what you believe in, hopefully we can all understand that Earth is just like us, an organism. It needs certain nutrients to keep it alive, just like everything else on this earth, and we're all connected. I strongly believe that. Definitely in a much more complicated way than maybe we think. But you always got to think to yourself with something like the pandemic, when this does happen, and you see Mother Nature kind of taking a break. And we live in Florida, so I have tons of buddies in South Florida and South Miami and Miami Beach, and they're sending me pictures. It was March to July where no one was in the street, no one was in the water, no cruise ships were going. And Miami Beach went from murky and like brackish to, it looked like the Bahamas. It was absolutely unbelievable. And it's because Earth finally got a chance to take a step back and take a breather. And that goes to show you, I mean, cruises are fun, sure, Just like riding a plane is great from going to point A to point B, but if we can, cut out those little things here and there and do what we can again to kind of extend Earth's life, it's very visible when you take your time and you actually educate yourself on these topics. It's way better to enjoy the Earth that's beautiful for millions of years versus enjoying it for just our lifetime. It's really our job to kind of protect this Earth for future generations. So
Definitely. And self education and self advocacy are huge, and they're huge themes in your story because doctors wouldn't necessarily sit you down and tell you everything that you discovered by doing your own research. And I'm
yeah,
curious to know over the last year and a half, how do you see your life has changed? Taking on a plant based diet changes so much mentally as well, spiritually as well, I would imagine.
for sure. Well, it's definitely it's cheaper, believe it or not. A lot of people think eating plant based is more expensive because I mean, a head of lettuce, I suppose, is more expensive than a McDonald's burger. So I guess in that aspect, yeah, it's a little bit more expensive. But when you actually get fresh produce and you're not buying in bulk, sometimes I used to go to Sam's Club or Costco and I used to buy, that big thing of chicken. I forget how many came with it, but it was like 24 fillets. Like it was ignorant. Like, who needs that much, food in one time, unless you have a big family. I didn't, it's just me and the wife. But, buying small portions and buying what you want to eat. I really enjoy that aspect of it where it's all fresh. There's less processed foods that we eat. So you naturally just feel better. It's allowing us to cook a lot more at home. That's been a big difference because when you have all these fresh items, naturally you have to, cook, but it's better to cook at home than actually eating out. So we're saving a lot of money in that aspect. So there's a lot of benefits from a financial standpoint to eat plant based. So I would probably say that's the biggest aspect because I appreciate food more now. There was one book I read. It's Dr. Michael Greger, and I believe if I remember, it's How Not to Die. I think that's the working title. This is about a year ago. I read it. Dr. Michael Greger. It was a great book because it really talks about enjoying the nutrients that we eat. And I think sometimes we forget about that. So, switching to plant based now because it's all fresh and it's colorful and it's a lot of greens, a lot of plants, a lot of, bulky things, beans, lentils, things like that. So it's really allowed me to appreciate every time you take a bite where I'll actually take a bite and I'll set down my fork or my spoon and I'll chew. Like I'll chew more than I've ever chewed in my life because by chewing in your cheek ducts, you're actually soaking up more nutrients that way, as opposed to naturally, what do we typically do? We go out to dinner, we grab that big burger, we take one bite and then we swallow. We don't even
Because it's
enjoy
also
food anymore.
processed. It doesn't even need to be a lot of
That's
those
right.
types of, not all foods, of course, but a lot of those kinds of foods, the bread, the burger, it's all been broken apart. So it doesn't require so much chewing.
Yeah, 100%. And even if you did, it doesn't have the nutrients that, a nice hearty quinoa salad would have, right? So that's really opened up my eyes a lot because I enjoy food more and I'm realizing I'm getting more nutrients. And, I had kind of like a little bit of rosacea and some skin rashes. That's all gone since I've been plant based. My skin has just gotten a lot better. I don't get dried out as much anymore. I sleep better. I don't drink that much anymore either, alcohol, because I don't really see the value in it anymore. I think before I did because again, we talk about processed foods. Being plant based, it makes you have not just an appreciation for food, but it lets you see the other side of the fence. The grass is definitely greener because when you eat these processed foods, we feel sluggish and gross. We don't maybe consciously know it, but after you eat like a big gross meal at a restaurant, you come back and you just don't feel good. Well, that's because it's just not good for you. So that carries over to the next day and you're not going to be able to have as much energy. So you fill yourself with caffeine and coffee and you try to get through the day and then you crash at 3 p.m. and then you stuff your face with an unhealthy meal again. And, we kind of have this cycle of eating bad and processed foods leading to depression, and then that leads to a bad work life balance. I mean, there's so many factors that are so crucial, and it all comes down to just eating right. And that's again the one thing I've really has opened up my eyes, and I get a bigger appreciation for food because we need it, right? We need food and we have to enjoy it, and it's very important for us to live a long healthy life the way we eat.
Can you bullet out the steps for anyone listening that's maybe dipped a toe in here and there oh, I'll have like a plant-based, a meatless Monday. Maybe I'll have a meatless Monday or a vegan taco Tuesday. But they're really
Sure.
reluctant to jump full in immersive. And maybe it just starts with taking an hour as you're meant to be falling asleep and looking on your phone researching. But if you could, because you've done it and you've walked the path, can you bullet out the steps people can take to adopt a plant-based diet that if they're interested in that?
Now there's tons of great options. There's a lot of good, what's been called by a lot of plant-based doctors as transitional vegan food versus traditional. So traditional vegan food, vegan is just a term that we humans made up, but really plant-based is the way to go. So if you were to research a diet, I would research plant-based as opposed to vegan because, vegans could just have nothing but bread every day and corn. It's that doesn't mean it's healthy, right? So plant-based means eating a whole foods diet, having nutrients in your meals. And the way you do that is very simple. I mean, you shop out the outer aisles when you go to the grocery store. So instead of shopping in those aisles that have boxed foods and canned goods and all that, shop in the produce section. Shop where all the leaves and the colorful foods are, and they're bright and colorful for a reason. I just tell people fill up your grocery cart with that, and then just simply go online. And there's so many recipes. I mean, even if you go to my blog, I post a bunch of recipes. But I would say the easiest thing if you want to transition is try those transitional foods that a lot of people do, like Beyond Meat, Impossible foods. These are good transitional foods where if you really love a burger, try the Beyond Burger, give that a shot, and then slowly wing yourself off that. I don't necessarily like to eat a lot of that stuff because again, those are processed, right? They might be healthier for you, but they are processed as well. So you want to stick with those whole foods, those fruits, the veggies, the lentils, and I would say start there first, and then slowly get away from that.
Great. So you've been able
Yeah.
to hand the audience some great keywords that they can go out from here and do research on. What other messages of health and happiness would you like to share before we let everybody go?
So I would probably say the big thing again, eating plant based is great, but do some research about Mother Nature. She was the first one to give us life, and whether you want to believe in something spiritual or not, I think it's just important that we appreciate not just what we're putting in our body, but we appreciate what put us here, and that's Earth. We're here for a reason. I mean, you don't really stop and think about it, but we're literally just a floating marble in this infinite universe that we can't even comprehend. It's so big, and the odds of us being born and actually being alive, especially on this planet altogether, where we don't have any major threats. I mean, unless you hop in an ocean, and there's a shark around you and you got some chum in the water, like you don't really have any dangers. We have it pretty good. And I would just hate that we ruin this over something as stupid as I want to eat meat, or I want to drive a gas vehicle, or I want to make money. We kind of have to get away from that. I think we have to get more in the mindset of Earth has given us a chance to live a beautiful life and have awesome, destinations that we could visit and have all these great things that we can do on Earth. And let's just not take it for granted. Educate yourself on how fortunate we are to be here. Let's not mess it up because I enjoy it. So don't mess it up for me. Don't mess it up for you
Amazing. Or our kids. Very
or our
beautifully
kids.
said. And thank you so much for helping us start our day with gratitude, awareness, and some homework. Every one of you listening, please go out and just do a Google search today. That's your homework. It's 5 minutes, a 5-minute commitment. Tony
Love it.
Berardo, everybody. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Shannon. Good to see you. Let's do it again.
Mhm.